Entering the atmosphere in T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined by my pal and yours, Doominal Crossing. What's going on, Doom? How are you? How's your week going? It's felt like a long time since last week, even though it wasn't. I don't know if that sensation is with you as well, but for me, I just had a really busy week, so it feels like, man, it's been a long time since I talked to Doom.
Yes and no, and I think we were talking about this last week, how, you know, there's some aspects of the year that feels like it's just been moving at a snail's pace, and other aspects of the year that's just been lightning quick. Like, again, that marathon that we did, it feels like that was an eternity ago, whereas the Switch reveal feels like it happened just yesterday, and we're already near the big Switch 2 blowout. We're even a week closer to that than we were last week, and honestly, that's pretty much been all that's been on my mind. I am so excited for that Switch 2 reveal, but otherwise, there isn't really that much going on in my life. However, I do want to give a special shout out to our wonderful friend Joey Ferris. He and his wife Crystal have just welcomed their second child into the world. So a huge congratulations to them both. I am extremely happy for the both of them.
I also want to congratulate them. I just smiled when I saw the name of their new daughter, and I was like, I can't wait for your third kid, who's going to be named Samus, you know? Like, so congrats to Joey. One of the reasons, actually, we had him on our marathon. Actually, we had him on the marathon for the game that we're talking about today, and he had to leave early, actually, because of, you know, some, not an issue, but, you know, his wife needed something, and she's obviously very pregnant at that time. So yeah, it's a big congrats to Joey, and yeah, congrats to him and his family. And a segue, I got a couple segues actually. Number one, the Switch 2 Direct. I'm going to just reiterate it again. We are going to be streaming the Switch 2 Direct, and we're going to stream it as it happens. So whatever ungodly time in the morning it is, I think it's like 7 a.m. or something outrageous like that. We're going to be there, okay? And Doom and I and Allison Aletha are going to be doing kind of a Zelda Cast Omega Metroid a big joint stream. So what we're going to be doing, guys, is we're going to be streaming that on the Zelda Cast's Twitch page. Just because it's usually a little bit easier and cleaner to do it that way. So if you're interested in seeing our reactions, post-show thoughts, check out the ZeldaCast over on Twitch. So twitch.tv/ZeldaCast. We're going to be there. We're going to be early. We're going to be putting in the work. And we're going to have a great show and a great time. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we might see a little game called Metroid Prime 4 Beyond.
I don't think I need to cross my fingers. I'm feeling pretty gosh darn confident at this point. But, you know, we'll see. You know, who knows? Nintendo could surprise us all and just do a random Twitter drop out of nowhere. I'm feeling pretty confident we're going to be seeing some Prime 4 on the 4th month of 2025. Ayo. But yeah, I'm really excited for this.
I'm with you. I'm confident, but I've been surprised before by Nintendo, so I don't want to get cocky with anything, but I feel pretty good. Tell me what you think about this, Doom. Sorry, I know we're a little bit off topic, and maybe we should actually save this for our predictions episode, but whatever, let's talk about it now. I kind of thought that everybody that was saying, like, oh, you know, there's no chance that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a cross-gen title. Why would they do that? Why would they spend money on this game? It's not going to sell very well. I'm kind of thinking to myself when I hear stuff like that, man, like, Metroid fans are kind of like and I don't mean this in a negative context, but like fragile in a way where it's like you don't want to get your hopes up because you've been disappointed so many times in the past, where I was like, I get it. Like, I get that you don't want to set your expectations up and be disappointed, but I really think it's going to happen. And yeah, I'm really hoping that we see Metroid Prime 4 in just a couple of weeks on the 2nd.
we can go more in depth into that in our predictions episode for sure, because I think there's definitely a meaty topic to be had there. But
Indeed.
I'm inclined to agree with you, but at the same time, I also understand why other people feel that same way, because historically, Nintendo is very cautious when it comes to Metroid. And so I definitely understand how, as a fan, you don't want to overhype yourself. You want to go in with reasonable expectations, and it's reasonable to assume that Nintendo is going to play it very safe with Metroid Prime 4. That being said, and I've talked about this several times on the podcast before, I also think there's several reasons to believe that Nintendo is going to be very ambitious about this title. But again, I've already talked about it on the podcast before, and I'll save those reiterations for when we actually go into our predictions episode, where it's going to be especially relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll save it. There's certainly a conversation to be had about the impact of historical decisions for the Metroid series and the impact on the mental state is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. I think that Metroid fans are afraid of getting hurt because we've been hurt so much before by Nintendo. So we'll revisit that topic there. And by the way, if you have any predictions for what is going to happen on the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, let us know. We're gonna be posting a tweet, whatever they're called on Blue Sky, just a post, in the next couple of weeks here, and we'll ask for some fan feedback as well. But yeah, let us know what you think is going to happen, and maybe we'll read it off on the show. Before we get going here, and this is the last thing I'm going to do before the last possible delay that we can have before we get into this game that we're talking about today. I have to update everybody on a life event that happened with me. Doom, about 3 times a year, I'll tell myself, I'm going to grow a beard. I'm going to do it. This is the time I'm going to grow a full beard. And I made it about 2.5 weeks, and I broke down and I shaved it last night. I shaved it all off. Maybe it's because we knew we were talking about Metroid Prime Federation Force Day. I'm not sure, but it's gone.
You know what? I will say, though, you're rocking the Fred Durst soul patch, and honestly, that's even better, so I love it.
Man, when my hair turns gray, which probably isn't far off, I'm going to go full dad vibes Fred. I'm going to get the glasses, I'm going to get the saggy pants, I'm going to get the whatever jacket he's, and that's just going to be my life when that happens. So, hopefully not too far away. Maybe hopefully far away, though, I don't know. But yes, indeed, we are back with another definitive ranking episode, and as Doom and I were just talking about, actually, this is the first definitive ranking episode that I will be participating in since October 18th of 2023. So almost 18 calendar months have passed since the last time that I definitively ranked one of these Metroid games. Of course, we did Metroid Zero Mission for the 20th anniversary, and we definitively ranked Metroid Prime 2 for its 20th anniversary as well. And for whatever reason, I just happened to not be on those shows. And so I'm really excited to get back into the thick of things today. And what a game to welcome us back into the definitive ranking. We are going to be talking about Metroid Prime Federation Force, which we should acknowledge off the top here, Doom, that it's a tough game to rank, just because it's so fundamentally different from a standard Metroid game, right? It's a lot of the things don't necessarily translate in a 1-for-1 kind of ranking, but I think they translate enough. I think that they're, for example, there's not traditional expansions or power-ups, but there are things that you can grab in the levels, right? And so, I do think that is going to help us out, kind of trying to get this done. And so, yeah, we're going to go through, and we're going to go through all the different categories and give it a ranking from 1 to 5, 1 being not so great, 5 being amazing. And to really quickly kind of recap here for everybody that hasn't, maybe this is your first definitive ranking episode that you've ever listened to, what we're doing is we're giving a score to the 10 essential ingredients, let's call them, that make a Metroid game. And so what we have determined those ingredients is the world and atmosphere. So what's the vibe, what's the setting, what's the mood, the art style, so the design of Samus, the design of the enemies, the graphics in general, which probably has never been more pertinent to any game we've done than this. The story of the game, self-explanatory there. The pacing and progression, I feel like, is a big one. And maybe that's going to be a little bit different for this game. We might have to adjust that a little bit. But generally speaking, that's going to be how the game guides you to where you need to go. And often, if this is done well, you don't even notice it. It's very subliminal. But when it's not done well, you do notice it. The gameplay or the gimmick of the game. So like what's that one unique hook? Do we have a hyper mode? Do we have a zero suit section, etc. The items and abilities, again, pretty self-explanatory. What do the areas look like? That's another one. Enemies and bosses, what do those look like? The expansions and power-ups, how fun or not fun are all the extras in the game to get? And of course, rounding us off is going to be music. So are we humming along? Are we having a good time? Are we liking what we're hearing? And kind of in keeping with some of my previous definitive rankings here, I didn't preemptively assign scores. I kind of like to just do it as we do it. You know what I mean? Because then I feel like if I write a score down before, then I'm just like, okay, this is my score, and I kind of defend it a little bit. I'm not as open to maybe some other ideas or other thoughts. So I'm going to be really just winging it here as we do this. And I feel like that's for me the best way to do a definitive ranking. So I'm pretty pumped to get into this because I don't know. My thoughts are a little bit different after the Omega Metroid Marathon playing Metroid Prime Federation Force. I had a pretty good time.
Yeah, so for those who didn't hear, because I think all of us, during the end of the marathon, we all went around and talked about what our favorite event was. And, I said it straight up. I think Federation Force was the most fun event that we put on of all. And we put on some phenomenal events that I absolutely love being a part of. But my God, that Federation Force event, even just being on the other side and not participating, just being, just kind of being in the control booth, making sure, everyone was working. I was just having so much fun watching you guys play. And, while I don't think that's going to change my objectives, I don't know if objective is the right word, my personal stance that I have towards the game. I don't think anything between the marathon and now has actually changed. I do feel like I'm going into this episode on a more positive note, and I'm ready to I don't know. I think before I would have absolutely dreaded this episode, but I'm really excited about this episode today. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, yeah, you're right. Objectively, is this a great Metroid game? No, it's not, right? Of course it's not. And I think everybody knows that. But I don't think it's the worst game either. Now, again, what we're ranking is based on how a Metroid game is kind of put together. So just by virtue of that, Federation Force might struggle a little bit with some of these categories. And there's certainly some categories on this ranking that it's going to deservedly get beat up for. But I have some more positive things to say than maybe your average Metroid fan would about Federation Force. Particularly because, up until 2 months ago, I really hadn't experienced this game multiplayer. And that's kind of the thing with these games is if you can play them the way that they were intended to be played, they're a lot better than playing them solo. And even playing solo, I don't mind Federation Force. So I'll tell you what, let's just get into it and start off because these shows are usually a bit longer there because there's a lot of ground to cover. So we shouldn't dilly-dally here, Doom. Let's go with our first category. That is the world and atmosphere. And this is a little bit different because generally speaking, you're going to be playing a Metroid game and it's going to kind of be self-contained to one planet or one area, I guess, that kind of freely flows into the next is how I would describe it. There are exceptions, of course, Metroid Prime 3 comes to mind, Metroid Prime Hunters as well. But generally speaking, your game is taking place on one location, so you can kind of lump it together a little bit more easily. And this one is not. This one is taking place on 3 different planets and eventually a space pirate setting, or ship rather. But I don't think that necessarily works against the world and atmosphere. That being said, I don't know I don't know that we can rank this one too highly, at least for me. I think that the setting of the three planets is like okay, and it varies. Like
Yeah.
you've got Talvania, which is very yeah. You know what? Actually, Talvania is probably one of the cooler planets because it's kind of industrial, it's kind of electrical, it's kind of a neat little area. You've got Bion, which we've been there, seen that before, but it's kind of like a cool, rocky, fiery area. Where I think the game really struggles is Excelsior, which is the ice planet, because that is very, like, eh. So the world and atmosphere, I don't know. I'm tempted to give it a 2, but I could be swayed. What do you think?
Say at the very least, I think we're both in agreement that this is going to be no higher than a 3. Like, 3 is about the highest that I could give this. That being said, I think 2 sounds about right, which is weird because again, like a month ago I would have been like, yeah, pound this game into the ground, give it a 2, but I don't know. Like I agree, it should be a 2, but I don't know. That's kind of a bummer. I want to be a little bit more positive on this game today, but I also got to be real, and I think 2 feels right for that world and atmosphere.
I think so. Like it doesn't have that kind of atmospheric sense of dread that most other Metroid games have. And I mean, that again, that's virtue of like what the game is. Like, it's a co-op game or supposed to be, right? So like you don't get that same kind of vibe when you have friends playing with you, or even the little robot machines that are flying around you. It kind of takes that inherent sense of danger away. And I think that matters. And you also kind of have an intermission between everything as well, where you can like change your load, change your paint job, etc. And I think that kind of takes away from the vibe and the setting as well. And like, it works in other areas, but for this particular category, I think it works against it. And this is probably one where this game struggles due to the nature of like what it is, compared to a Super Metroid or a Metroid Prime.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing as well, and I do think it's fair to compare this to the other Metroid Prime games in the sense, but like, one of the big things that Retro Studios is known for is just packing an absurd level of detail into their environments. And we can also talk about, this will also carry over into the art direction as well. And I'm not going to say that there's no detail in these areas, or there isn't like a couple of like really standout rooms that like look really nice or set pieces, but by and large, like, the art is very simplistic. It's very to the point. It doesn't really have its own unique flavor it's trying to offer. It's very it's very standardized, point A to point B. Yeah. There isn't a lot really going for it, and it's by design. It's to make the paths as clear as possible, but as a result, you really get a lot of that detail taken away, and it just kind of makes all these environments blend together. Even though I would say Talvania and Bion in particular really start to blend together because of their color palettes. Excelsior, it's a pretty generic area, but at least like it has a unique color palette. You got whites and grays versus like the yellows and browns and kind of grays of like Bion and Talvania.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. Well, let's go to the art style then. I mean,
yeah,
this is a 1. This is 1.
Yeah, it's a 1. It's a 1. I'm sorry.
This is probably the singular biggest thing about Metroid Prime Federation Force that holds it back, right? Like, and this is a thing that like didn't have to be an issue, but it is an issue. And I'm not gonna sit here and say like I think that the art style is like awful for everything. I don't. I think that some things look pretty decent in the chibi art style. Like I think the space pirates in this game look great. I think that like a lot of the ships and stuff like that look good. I think that, yeah, honestly speaking, like even the mechs like themselves look okay, but when you have to talk to General Alex Miles after every single mission, and it's just this like insane bobblehead, and you constantly see Samus, and Samus looks terrible, and it just really takes away from everything. And like when you leave your mech and you've got your little, like, it looks like a Mii, running around some of these levels. It's hard to take the game seriously, which is fine if your tone and setting isn't of a serious game. Like Zelda, you could probably get away with that, if you have like a game like the Wind Waker or something like that, right? But like that style wouldn't work for Twilight Princess because it just doesn't fit the tone, and it's a real dissonance between what the game looks like and the atmosphere and vibe that the game is trying to present. And I think that's also why the world and atmosphere just like doesn't work. Like they're really tied together, and it didn't have to be. Like I guess maybe the chibi art style, if I'm just speculating here, maybe it was easier for the 3DS to handle because it's a little bit more rounded, less detail orientated. But I mean, it doesn't do this game any favors at all.
So I don't know, I have a really conspiracy brained hypothesis on why the chibi art style came to be, but I'm not.
I'm ready. Yes.
I was about to say I don't know if I'm ready to get into it. Maybe I am though. It sounds like I can't just drop something like that.
Yeah, you can't just say that and not tell us now. Come on, give us the goods.
All right. So about a month before Federation Force came out, there was like this 10-minute gameplay overview that came out that was released exclusively in Japan. Wasn't released in any other territories. It was released exclusively in Japan. And I think that the chibi art style was one of several ways to try to make the game more appealing to a Japanese audience. And I think, and hear me out on this, keep in mind, I have absolutely no proof to back any of this up. We're like tinfoil hat, taking these out of thin air. But like, one of the big things that Japanese gamers struggle with when it comes to shooters is motion sickness. There are a lot of people in other territories struggle with that too, but like that's like a well-known thing. Like first-person shooters in particular don't do well in Japan because that continent is very susceptible to motion sickness for wide variety of reasons that are beyond me as someone who's not who isn't culturally knowledgeable in that.
Sure.
And so one of the other things about Federation Force is because you're playing in a mech, you're also moving very slowly. That's a way to diminish that motion sickness. And so I don't know. There's a lot of game design elements, at least to me, that seem to be more catered and to be more appealing to a Japanese market, or even a more casual type of gamer who might be more susceptible to motion sickness than someone who has been doing a lot of gaming. And so I feel like that art style is one of several things that tried to make this game more introductory friendly, and that's the key, which I think makes sense because after Metroid Other M, Nintendo didn't really know what to do with Metroid, and so they wanted to create something that would be, more approachable for, the average gamer. Obviously, that didn't happen. It's the worst-selling Metroid game of all time. That ended up not coming to pass. But I think that was ultimately the intent with, with the art style and some of those gameplay decisions, was just to make Metroid more approachable in general.
I could buy that. I could buy that for sure. Like, it's kind of the struggle there, though, and that's why I think Federation Force is the worst selling Metroid game. It's because like you're trying to make the game more appealing to an area that doesn't necessarily traditionally gravitate towards Metroid. I think it's pretty well known that like most of the sales from Metroid come from North America, not Japan. But in doing so, you made the game, trying to appeal to Japanese audience, you made the game very unappealing to a Western audience. And I still don't know if the chibi and the first-person shooter was enough or the slow-paced first-person shooter was enough to really win over that Japanese audience. So, and unfortunately, you've kind of got a game now that doesn't really appeal to Western audiences, doesn't really appeal to Eastern audiences, and to top it all off, didn't review necessarily very well. So it kind of was a perfect storm to make it the least selling Metroid title. And yeah, like I mean, I can understand, and that's kind of one of my critiques about Nintendo sometimes is like, it seems like at times that all they really know is like cute stuff sell good. You know what I mean? Like Kirby is the classic. People ask me all the time, like, what do you got against Kirby? And it's like, I feel like that's the epitome of like the cute stuff sell good mentality that Nintendo has, where it's just like, as long as it's cute, we don't have to worry about how good it is. We don't have to worry about how bad it is. Like, people will buy it. And for the most part, they're right. But I think that this was just like such a backfire, and it was hard to take the game seriously with the art style that it presented. And I think this game needed to be taken seriously for it to be a success. Like, you can have like weird spin-off games, you know, like I'll go back to Zelda for a second here, like a Zelda Cadence of Hyrule or something like that. But like that game was just like a ridiculous rhythm game, right? Like it didn't require an art style or a serious tone in order to get that game across, and I think this game did. So it's not even necessarily that the area looks bad or that like the game looks bad, like the character models look bad, but the decision to do the art style that it did, I think in general, is what really drives it down to a number one. That's probably the worst thing that this game does, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, it's the first thing that like stuck out to play. Like when we saw Metroid Prime, I remember when we saw Federation, we first saw the ship flying out. At first, I was like, new Metroid game, and then we saw the chibi models, and it's like, oh, never mind, this isn't Metroid. And then the logo came up, and it was just like, wait, what?
Yeah, it was very surreal. I remember watching it and just being like, you got to be kidding me! Like after. I mean, what was it, like at least 5 years at this point? Like, this is what we're doing to follow up Other M. So I think that it just got the game off on the wrong foot with almost everybody, and for that it deserves a 1.
Yeah, honestly, that last part pretty much summed it up perfectly. Exactly, and it's unlike. You know, it's you mentioned Wind Waker earlier, because like I know a lot of people like to compare this to Wind Waker, like, oh well, Wind Waker's art style was hated on at first, but now it's beloved by fans. Well, that's different because first off, you know, Zelda has already at that point had experimented with various different art styles, including like Toon art styles with like the top-down Zeldas. But on top of that, by the time Wind Waker HD came out, that was 10 years later, and by that time, that art style had already been welcomed in by fans. This is going to shock a lot of people, but next year is the 10-year anniversary of Federation Force, which I know that's wild. That doesn't sound like it should be. That doesn't sound like it should be possible, but it's true. The game turns 10 next year. And while opinions are definitely not as harsh on Federation Force as they were on launch, most people tend to universally agree that the art style that was a bad choice.
You know, the other difference too is that Wind Waker was a great game. And that's probably simple, you know, but it's true.
Wind Waker is also a fantastic game, yes.
And that matters when you're trying to win over people to a new direction. And the other thing about Wind Waker as well is, like, that game, like, for example, when you looked at Link, his eyes were moving around. Like, it was very interactive, whereas this is just, like, it's like chibi for the sake of chibi. which sounds weird, but that is crazy. This game is turning 10 years old next year. Holy cow.
I know.
Oof.
And so does AM2R.
That's right. Well, I can't wait to definitively rank AM2R for its 10-year anniversary, but
that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, maybe Federation Force will revisit somehow, some way. Let's go over to the story. I've kind of taken the lead on the last couple ones here, Doom. I have some thoughts on the story, but I want to see what your thoughts are before I maybe jump in with mine here.
All right, so I mean, it's kind of hard to definitively rank the story because there really isn't that much of a story, to be honest. But I mean, that hasn't stopped us from ranking similarly unstory-focused Metroid titles. Like we still rank the story of Zero Mission to NES despite the fairly simplistic stories there, and I think Federation Force at least has a little bit more going on there. I think the story as it is fine. Or at least it would be. The story that it presents for the most part, I think, is like a good 3 out of 5 story for the most part. But of course, there is one peculiar event that happens near the end of the game, and it truly is the final boss battle might actually be the most egregious thing I've ever seen in a Metroid game, even amongst some of the worst moments of Metroid Other M. It is such a. It is actually there's one scene in Other M I think is worse.
I think there's one scene in Other M that's more egregious, but it's not far.
But
you're not wrong.
It's one of those things, and I've said this on a few different episodes before. I get that when you're working on a game, it's on one hand it's hard to tell. Something might sound amazing in your head, and you don't realize how awful. And as someone who's worked on projects before, that's happened to me. I can relate to that. That being said, though, it baffles me how anybody would have ever thought that turning Samus into a brainwashed kaiju monster and making you fight her would have gone well at all whatsoever. That even with that caveat I just said, that just it baffles me. It absolutely baffles me that decision was made. And I don't know.
I'll tell you what.
I feel like I want to give it. I feel like I want to give it a 1, but I just gave the art style a 1. I don't know if I want to do 2 1s in a row, but man, is I don't know, Andy. Do you think that one moment really lowers it to 1, or can we get away with a 2 here? What do you think?
So I had 2 scores in my mind that I was going in between, and I do feel positively about Metroid Prime Federation Force. Like I want to just say that very clearly. I had a great time playing it, as we'll get to as we get to some of these other categories. But this is going to be a 1. I think like I was like, can we get this to a 2? And I don't think we can. And I don't think it's just because of the Samus scene either. To be fair, you go to the various planets and you hear about like some various lore about like ancient civilizations that used to live there or whatever. But like you really don't get anything about them. Like there's occasional like little I don't know, logs or records that you can find that will give you like the just the tiniest bit of backstory, but it's so vague and infrequent that it might as well not be there. So like I kind of feel like they could have done a better job at establishing like the culture, the people that used to live on Bion or used to live on Telvania. And like, I mean, listen, you don't have to do like Chozo lore to the degree that Metroid Prime does, but like a little something would have went a long way. And I guess like the other thing that I kind of take umbrage with the story, not related again to what we'll talk about in a second, but like it does kind of feel a little bit out of left field, where it's just like, okay, Metroid Prime 3 is done, the Space Pirates homeworld has been defeated, Phase has been destroyed, the pirates are in tatters. But they have this ginormous weapon that they have that can destroy planets. It's like, where was this during this very critical battle against like the entire Galactic Federation? So it kind of does feel a little bit like feels a little bit like Star Wars, like almost like, oh yeah, the Empire's dead, but like here's the First Order or whatever.
Well, to be fair, it sounds like they just stumbled upon this. It doesn't sound like it's something they've had in their back pocket for the whole trilogy.
And that's fair. That could be true.
Which it's still it's a bit convenient still. It's not very good, but I don't think it's like something they've had with them this whole time.
The cardinal sin though is not even like the final boss battle with Samus, which is certainly a sin. But like the cardinal sin of this game and its story is that it constantly, repeatedly, over and over again, like Samus gives us this intel, Samus told us this, Samus did this, and it's like, damn, I'd rather be playing as Samus. It sounds like she's doing some cool stuff. I'm like doing grunt work, and I'm putting like little escape pods, and I'm sending them back out into space. Like that doesn't feel very important in the grand scheme of things. It kind of feels like you're doing like the cleanup work, which can work in a game, but not this game. Like it feels like what you're doing is very unimportant compared to what Samus is doing, which is fine. It's a spinoff, and you're not playing as like this legendary bounty hunter. But like when you constantly have to hear about the legendary bounty hunter, and like I think one of the most egregious moments is the level where the giant beetle is coming at you, and like it's a hard level, especially solo, and you finally beat it, and you take down this massive health bar that this beetle has, and all of a sudden the level's over. You're like, okay, great, and then the beetle comes back to life, and you're like, oh my god, and then Samus comes out and just blasts it with her ship. And then Miles is just like, seems like you owe Samus one there, Trooper. It's so, like, invalidating to what you're doing. That it just, again, like, I think that they just could have done a better job with the story. And yes, I mean, the final Morph Ball battle with Samus is... Yeah, that's...
yeah,
that's
honestly, that about sums it up. Yeah.
That's something. Yeah. So I hate to give it a 1 again, but I feel like I was like, can we give it a 2? I don't know that I can go there in good conscience, because I think it's one of the worst elements of the game. Not the worst, but one of the worst.
I think also going off, because you've brought up the whole thing about, you know, Samus is going on a way cooler mission than we are, and how I'd much rather be playing. You've gone that before, but I think that also ties into the story, which we're specifically talking about, in the sense that, like, it feels like a lot of the objectives that we do in that game are... I'm not going to say all of them are. Some of them are direct results of, like, previous missions we've done, but so many of them feel very detached from what we're doing. It's like, oh, here's a random transmission we got from Samus. We're going to respond to that, but it's not really tied to what we were doing before.
Right.
And I feel like, I want to say, like, half the missions almost feel like that. Maybe not quite half, maybe like 40%, but a good portion of those missions just kind of come out of nowhere, and they feel, you know, very detached from each other. And that also does hamper the narrative too, I think.
Yeah, like a good 25% of the missions that you do, I bet you start off with, like, we got intel from Samus about this or this or this. So it's kind of like you as a Marine, so I'm putting myself in the story here. So, like, General Alex Miles, or like you as the Marine, have kind of no agency. You're just waiting around for Samus to tell you to go do something, and you do it. And it's like, it's clearly the unimportant stuff, or else Samus will just do it herself. So, not a great look. Not a great look. What's your official score for the story? Are you
a 1? I'm going a 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's fair. Pacing and progression. This is a difficult one. I don't know quite how to rank it, because this is so different in the way that the game is done. I think probably the best way to interpret, for me, pacing and progression into what Federation Force does is it like, are there any levels that are just complete slogs to get through? And there's one or two for sure.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a few. The cart pushing level definitely stands out.
Yes.
To me.
That's immediately what I thought of. You know, and some of the ladder levels too, like right before the final boss, like you just got to go through like hordes and hordes and hordes of space pirates, and that is just like oof.
There's also, I remember the not the first level, I want to say it's like level 4 or level 5, where you're trying to trap all of those ice titans. Oh. And I remember during our marathon, there was one of the funniest moments from Goo, where he's like, "Oh, I get it now," and that's all.
Yeah.
And he was explaining it before. He's like, you know, this seems all right. It seems like a fun game. I don't know. Yeah. And then he got to that level, and then immediately was like, "Oh, now I understand." And so that level also kind of sticks out as one that God, I don't know how you played that single player, Andy. I would have torn my hair out trying to do that level with just by myself.
It's actually easier single player, to be honest with you, than
really
than with pals. I found, because like when you're playing single player, you're OP because you got like this lone wolf mod that makes you really powerful. You got the 3 little bots that never die, so it's easy enough to lure them yourself, but and the blender level, like the cart pushing level, that level is just awful. Like single player, it's terrible. It is so terrible to do single. It was fine actually to do multiplayer, but you can certainly tell like some of these levels are designed to be played multiplayer only. Mm-hmm. So like I don't know, like I don't know how we rank this one here, because it's like it's level based and very clearly level based rather than
Yeah.
like a straight up adventure.
And also player based, because there are
Yeah.
some levels that I think substantially improve. Like, going back to that beetle boss fight. Miserable to do in solo play, but
Yeah.
As long as you have even just two players, I think it becomes like a pretty decent boss fight. I think it becomes a pretty cool set piece, and like that alone. And I think we should be taking that into consideration, because that is the intended experience of this game, is to be playing with friends. And in that regard, while there are some stinkers, there are also some pretty good levels. The infiltration level, where you get out of your mech and you're kind of solid snaking your way through the space pirate base, setting off the bomb, leaving, and then you get this kind of little horde battle when you reach your mech again. That's a pretty cool level. I really like that. There's also, we didn't get to it in the marathon, but there's another one where you fall into a trap and you have to kind of re-find your mech. That's another really cool level that I enjoy. The Metroid level, I think that's one of the better levels in the game as well, where you're actually like taking out Metroids and you have to extract the Metroid egg, which also is going to play into the Prime 4 story, as we've seen. So I will say, at the very least, I'm pretty confident we're not giving this a 1. I think this.
No.
In fact, I think I would go as high as a 3 on the pacing and progression overall, because while there are a lot of levels that are stinkers, while there are a lot of levels that feel sluggish to get through, there is also some genuinely really fun and well-designed levels in the mix, especially, again, when you're playing this the intended way with friends.
You know what? I think I'm going to give it a 3 as well, actually. You make a good point there. And I was kind of thinking, too, like, maybe another thing that kind of is the equivalent to pacing and progression in this game is, like, doing levels that aren't kind of, like, the same objective, like, over and over. So, like the one level, maybe you have to defend something. The next level, it's a boss fight. The next level after that, you're playing mini-golf and Bion, whatever. Yeah. And I think, like, generally speaking, the game does a somewhat fine job of... of mixing it up a little bit there. So, I think a 3 is fine for pacing.
And the final bit of the game can become a bit more of a slog, because it does start to rely on more, defend the outpost, don't let the device get too damaged. And it does that way too much, and that, even with teammates, it can feel a bit sluggish near the end. But I think overall I'm going to stick with my 3.
I think that's fair. Oh, we are. I mean, we're bang on so far here. And I wonder if we're going to stay bang on here. The gameplay, or the gimmick of the game. So, I mean, there's not really a gimmick to this game. Like, the gimmick is you're in a mech, and you can have different mods, and you can upgrade and whatever you have, going on there. You know what? Like, I think in terms of gameplay, there's things I like and don't like. And it probably depends on how you play this too, because I think if you were to play this on a standard 3DS, which I don't have, I have the new 3DS, which has like the other little, it's not a joystick, but it's like a little nub that you can move around for like dual analog, basically. I think that it'd be tough to play this with just like gyro controls on a regular 3DS. I don't know how, I couldn't do that. It's fine on the 3DS, and it was fine playing it how we played it at the marathon. There's some pros and some cons to the gameplay. The pros, I think, are that there's a lot of customization. You could really determine how you want to play the game. If you want to have like decoy mods, if you want to have weapon mods, if you want to have defense mods, you could almost like adjust it's almost like a crude way of like, who's the healer, who's the tank, who's the whatever, the red mage. But there are certainly some downfalls too, which is like you move slow as hell, like just miserably slow, and aiming I think can be like hit or miss sometimes, like the way that like you have to lock on, but you still have to move your reticle like in that lock on itself. It's not just like you lock on a Metroid Prime, like you just shoot. I think, like, I know why they did it, and sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's not.
All right, I'm about to completely derail this. I've never asked you this before, but I have to know, why do you pronounce gyro like that?
What, gyro or gyro? I don't even know what I say sometimes. What did I say? Gyro or gyro?
You pronounce gyro with a hard G every time, and it makes me laugh. And I've never asked you about that before, but I have to know, why do you pronounce it like that?
That's the way it should be pronounced.
Anyways,
my answer,
back on
Doom.
topic.
How do you say
back
it?
on topic?
Hold on. All right, so I don't even know what I said. So I said gyro or gyro.
You've said gyro several times when referring to gyro, but it's pronounced gyro.
This is what. Well, you know what? I work with a bunch of people, ironically, that say GIF, not GIF, GIF.
So here's the thing.
That bothers
I think
me.
that's. I agree. That's a crime against humanity. But at least the creator of the GIF pronounces it GIF, so I can understand that. I don't care. It's still GIF in my heart, but I at least get that. I mean, you were the only person.
Gyro starts with a J. All right, guys. Are you team gyro or are you team gyro? Let us know.
You're the only person I know who pronounces it like. Anyways, I'm getting my ADHD is way too off the rails right now. Anyways, this is another tough one because, like, my gut reaction is, I'm not a fan of the gameplay. I think this is the one area today where I'm going to be a little bit harsher than you, but at the same time, and I talked about this before on our favorite things about our least favorite Metroid games, I really do love that kind of first come, first serve weapon sharing system with your teammates. And I would really love to see something like that implemented in a better game, because I actually think that's kind of brilliant, especially with teammates if you're in a voice call together, because it has the potential for really cool strategy or just utter chaos. And I kind of love that about it, because, like, on one hand you could be like, maybe you and your teammates are being diplomatic, like you were mentioned earlier, like, okay, you're the heavy weapons expert, you're carrying all the super missiles, you're the healer, we're going to give you the energy tanks, you know what, you have a bit of all-around skill sets, so, we're going to give you so we'll give you some ice, we'll give you the electro gun, because you're good with that stuff. Or you could also just have a teammate that just out of nowhere just be like, all right, I'm going to get the energy tanks before anyone else can get them. And it's like, bro, give it back. And you have this absolute chaos erupting in the call. And I love that. I think there's like a lot of potential, for something like that. But yeah, the raw gameplay itself, the gameplay itself, and again, I was just talking about how there are some well-designed levels that are a lot of fun, but just the moment-to-moment gameplay just on a fundamental level doesn't work for me with Federation Force. Part of the reason is, again, just because of how obscenely slow it is, but as I've also mentioned before, RoboCop Rogue City was my game of the year in 2023, and let me tell you, that is an authentic RoboCop game. You are moving quite slow in that game, and that didn't change how much fun I thought the moment-to-moment gameplay was. And so I also don't necessarily think that, like, speed is the key factor holding this game back, though it definitely is one of them. And I think another thing is just, again, if you don't have that lone wolf mod, if you don't have those drones with you, so many of those enemies are just the most abysmal bullet sponges that you will ever encounter in a Metroid Prime title, and some of these guys will just take forever to kill. Not too bad.
Hold on, I got to push back on that, because, like, if you're playing solo and you're playing without the lone wolf mod or without your drones, like, that's on you. That's on the game's fault. That's on you.
Well, I'm saying, like, you don't have access to the lone wolf if you do have teammates, is what I'm saying, though. That's the point I'm trying to make. Which, again, is the intended way to play the game. And it's fine if you have, like, 2 or 3 teammates all hyper focused on one enemy, but, like, throughout the game you're going to be getting swarmed by multiple enemies, and a lot of the time, you're going to be facing, one section of enemies yourself, another teammate is going to be facing another section of enemies, and yeah, it just it creates they're trying to create a lot of attention, but just for me, it just kind of takes the fun out of the FPS experience for me. I'm not going to give it a 1 because I'm not going to give it a 1 because, again, I do think there are redeeming qualities. And like I said, I do think that weapon sharing system is actually pretty brilliant. I hope, even if it's not a Metroid game, I hope that something like that is revisited in a future Nintendo title. But I gotta give it a 2 just because, even if Federation Force is a bad Metroid game, first-person shooters are one of my favorite genres. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in an alternate world, even if, the game missed the mark as a Metroid title, it could have still at least appealed to me as a shooter fan, but it drops the ball there for me too, unfortunately.
Yeah, like, I'm going to push back on what you said, but then I'm going to push back on my retort already for myself.
That's fair.
So again, like, I think you're not wrong. Like, the enemies, if you don't have those mods and you're playing with friends, are brutal. We saw that in the marathon, but I think it comes down to, like, you're supposed to be coordinating with your teammates. But to push back on my retort, there's no way to do that without, like, in the actual game itself. Like, the little, like, hey, over here doesn't really cut it, right? Like, if there's no voice chat, then it doesn't work. So, I mean, you're probably right. Another thing I guess I would add to what you said, too, it's not the speed that's necessarily the problem, but it's just, like, you have such a big distance to cover in each map that's more so I think what drags it down. I think it probably could have used maybe a mod where you can increase the speed of your like mech, and I guess, to be fair, like, if you don't load it up with weapons, like, you are faster. But I mean, like, I'm not, like, totally higher than you. I am higher than you. I'm gonna give it a 3. I do think that there's, like, some good ideas there, good mechanics, and certainly some shortcomings as well. So I think a 3 is right in the middle. Man, we haven't even talked about the Blast Ball. Now that is maybe that's what we do for the 10-year anniversary. We definitively rank Blast Ball.
Ooh,
that could be something. Items and abilities. So how are the power-ups in this game? I like the idea of the mods. I think they're really great. And I'm tempted to give it a higher score because, like, there is a large variety of mods, and you can really customize your mech, you can customize your attack method or your defense. And because I don't know where else it fits either. I would count, like, the paint jobs as an item as well in the game that you can get. So, like, there is a lot of stuff that you can get and unlock and do and all of that kind of good stuff. I don't know, though, like as an idea, I think the mods are great, but, like, in actual practice, like, I don't know how many of them are, like, super vital. Like, when I play the game, I basically just have the same mods the entire game. Like, it's like, okay, this boosts my attack power. If I'm playing solo, it's like the lone wolf always. If I'm not, it's like boost my attack power, boost my defense, boost my drone attack power, like, and you really don't need to change those for the rest of the game. And I would generally say the same is, maybe this just says something about me as a player, but, like, I generally go through the game too, and I'm like, okay, I take a bunch of missiles, I take a bunch of, depending on what planet I'm on, either fire or ice or thunder, and I'll take a couple healing tanks, and you could pretty much get away with that same load for the entire game. So, like, there is a bunch of items and options for you, but, like, they're not all created equal. Like, they're there for you to get, but using them is kind of, like, not as, I don't know, not as rewarding as finding them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think another thing as well is the game, at least from a scoring perspective, isn't really balanced to accommodate some of those more support weapons. So, like, as we saw during the marathon, the slow beam is a very, very useful item to have equipped with you when you have a gang of people. But you don't really get equally compensated for those points as you would, if you had the power weapons. And, part of the fun of playing Federation Force with friends, at least I think, is that competitive aspect as well. Not just finishing the mission, but also, trying to, maybe screw your friends over a little bit so that you can get that extra point lead. I think some of that chaos in Federation Force, again, kind of playing back into, like, the item hoarding. And I think that chaos adds to the fun of the experience. And I wish I wish the point system was there to like also reward that, but
I agree. It needs like what Four Swords Adventures has. Sorry, this is like my fifth Zelda reference, but like after you play Four Swords Adventures, like each level, you're assigned like a point, and then you actually vote on who is the most valuable teammate, who is the most annoying teammate. And you get like reward. It's kind of like when you finish a game of Mario Party, like you get bonus stars based on that, right? It's a really effective system, and it can really change the complexion of how you play. If you want to play co-op or if you want to be a pain in the ass, like if Federation Force would have had that, that would have been awesome.
That sounds fantastic. I want to play Four Swords with you now. That sounds
honestly
awesome.
You should. It's so fun. It's fun solo and it's fun multiplayer. It's really great.
Yeah, that just won me over. Great pitch. But yeah, kind of going back on topic with the actual items and abilities. This one's also really difficult because while a lot of the items are while a lot of the items have some unique uses, they do also feel quite derivative of some of the stuff you already get in Metroid games. And, it's understandable for stuff like, the missiles and the super missiles and whatnot, but like, you get the ice beam, you get a fire weapon, which is similar to the Prime 1 plasma beam. You get the electro beam, which is similar to a couple of electric weapons that we've seen in other Metroid games, like the Volt Driver from Hunters, for example. Energy tanks obviously are big in Metroid game. I feel like that's kind of the one item of the derivative items, at least, that like really feel like they have a new lease on life in this game. Just because how they're used both in a cooperative sense, but as you also recently learned, how they can also repair devices, not just your own mech, which can come in really handy for that aforementioned blunder level.
I didn't know that the first time I played that level, by the way. I just had the most miserable time, and the second time somebody told me that, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Oh my god. Yeah.
But then you do also have, you do have some stuff like, the slow beam that I was talking about earlier, which again is super helpful when you have a lot of, when you have more than one players. It's a really fantastic support role weapon. You also have stuff like the decoys, which again, as goofy as they look, are really helpful when, a horde of enemies is on you and you need to get them off you. It kind of reminds me, I don't know how familiar you are with like Call of Duty Zombies, Andy. It kind of reminds me of like the monkey bomb. Anyways, I'm sure there's people watching who know what I'm talking about. But like, you have a bunch of zombies coming at you. You're like one hit away from death, and you just toss this monkey bomb, and just like that, all the zombies just come sprinting for that bomb and get off you. And it gives you just a few more seconds of breathing room to reload your weapons, catch your breath, and get ready for when they come back at you. That's kind of what the decoys remind me of in Federation Force, and they play a similar role. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I think for me this is going to be another 3. I was wondering if I was going to go for a 2, but I think I'm going to give this a 3. Maybe I'm being too nice on this. But But yeah, I think for me, I feel like the energy tanks, the slow beam, and that decoy is enough for me to at least give this a 3. Because I think in the context, they do provide some really interesting uses.
I think they do as well. And again, this could just be the way that I play the game. I think I'm going to go with the 2. Because I think the most interesting items that you get, I don't use. Like, I don't use any of those items. Like, basically any kind of green mod, I didn't really use for any extended period of time. I will say we used some of them in our multiplayer playthrough, so maybe they have more value there when like you're not just like powerful enough to just like take down enemies. I'm certain that is probably the case, but at least in my experience now, I think I'm gonna go with the 2 because I think that they could have maybe done just a little bit more to make those items a little bit more, I don't know, unique or something like that. It would have been cool, actually, if you could get some permanent upgrades along the way, too. Like, something, right? Like, after the boss. Because there's not very many bosses, but, like, if you got a permanent upgrade after each boss, like, maybe just, like, a plasma, like, an upgrade to your beam, like, that would be cool, too.
I do agree with that. That's actually, like, one of my big sticking points is, like, you collect so many mods throughout this level, but they're, like, in the level only, and then you lose all of it immediately after. And that always, like, I get why from a gameplay perspective they chose to go that route, but it didn't change the fact that it feels really lame. We complain about, Samus, losing your upgrades every mission. Well, pretty much happens through every single level in this game, and there isn't even like an abstract story reason tied to it. It just kind of happens.
It's
I
an
don't know,
epidemic in the Federation world, I think. Each mission after you're done, your stuff's gone.
Maybe it does deserve it too. I don't know. I feel like I've been harsh on this game, and I wanna.
I think you should stick with a 3. I think you should just give it a 3. By God. Okay.
All right, we're sticking with it.
Let's go to areas here. Now, there's 4 areas in the game, and you know what? I part of me wants to be generous too, because like the area, the aesthetic of each area, I think is okay. Like it's just kind of okay. Like the ice planet is just kind of okay. We've been there, we've done that. A fire rocky planet, we've been there, we've done that. Talvania is kind of the only one that sticks out as a little bit more interesting, and even then, it's kind of like this dusty, sandy, electrified planet that you've certainly seen before in Metroid, in places like almost like Chozo Ruins or like Skytown to an extent. So like the areas themselves are nothing to necessarily like write home about, but where I think that you can kind of get away with maybe giving it a little bit of a higher score than you usually might is like, or at least for me, is like some of the missions in the areas I think are pretty cool. And like there's some fun stuff that you do, like some planets, like you're infiltrating secret pirate bases, like we said. Some planets you're even Excelsior, there's like the boss level is pretty cool. You're kind of going into the core of the planet, you're in like this icy lake, which I think is kind of neat. There's like Metroid breeding rooms in some of the planets like that. There is some cool stuff to be had, and I will say this, I really like the design of Doom's Eye. I think like if you look at it, it looks really cool. It looks like a really awesome ship. And granted, like you go in and you do your level, and the ending boss is what it is, but I think that it looks really great. And what's probably worth a mention too is the ship that you're on, like the Federation ship that you go back to before each level. Looks cool. Like it's just a regular ship. There's nothing sticking out about it, but I'm feeling a little bit generous here. I think I'm going to give the areas a 3. I certainly don't know that you could go higher than that, but I think that's about as high as you can go, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to give it a 3. This is my turn to be a little bit charitable. Okay.
I think we might be swapping positions then. I don't think I can quite go that high. I think if I were to go that high, and I think the reason I'm not going that high is because, you mentioned that you're also considering the missions themselves, which is technically true, but when I'm thinking of the areas, I'm kind of going more back towards like the atmosphere, the music, and the actual environments themselves. I know technically the missions themselves are quite they take place in the areas. They're pretty important, but I don't know, at least for me, like I associate that more with like the raw gameplay and not so much with the areas themselves. So that's why fair. I'm kind of going with the 2. That being said, if I was considering that, I actually probably would agree with you, and that would probably bump it up to a 3 for me.
I think that's fair. And to be honest with you, it probably doesn't deserve a 3, but what the hell? I'm gonna give it a 3 anyways.
If this game deserves, it deserves for us to go a little easy.
A little bit of leeway, here and there. Because I mean, we certainly haven't pulled any punches in the areas that I think it deserved punches. So I mean, this is one where you can maybe get away either way. Let's move on. Let's go to the enemies and bosses. I feel like I'm floating between 2 scores in my head.
This is another tough one, because I was about to say a 3, and then I remembered the thing that I was just talking about a few categories ago, and it's like, it really is that powerful enough to drag it down at least a grade, if not 2. It is pretty. I don't know. I think I'm going to be generous, and I'm going to say 2, because despite how awful that boss battle is, and despite how the art style does ruin some of designs that could have looked a lot cooler. I do think there is still some pretty cool looking enemies. We were just talking about how the space pirate designs are like pretty decent in spite of the art style. They still managed to come out pretty cool looking. There's some awesome looking boss battles. Even some of like what is it? There's a couple of like these robotic computerized bosses that you fight like the mainframe towards them, which I think for what they are look pretty decent. They certainly don't look bad by any means. So yeah, I think I'm gonna give enemies, and honestly like the hoppers from Metroid Prime 3, I mean they pretty much look identical in this game. So I mean they still turned out fine. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 2. Would have been a 3, but that Samus fight is just bad enough to drop it down a letter grade, or a number grade in this case.
Yeah, you know what? That's fair, and I'm gonna kind of try and echo what you just mentioned before, which is I'm gonna try and separate the story from the fight, the Samus fight, because I think the fight is like okay, like as pure like just gameplay, like you gotta blast the ball into the electrical current. I mean I think that is like inoffensive to me. Like it's just like simple, it's fine, it's like whatever. I think I've done worse before, you know what I mean? What I would say is like I think that like the boss fights in the game are pretty decent. Like the few that there are there. Like there is God, I'm desperately trying to remember what the heck like any of these bosses are actually called, and of course now that I'm trying to think of it I can't, but the two fit like Sokin I think is a name. I think that's a fun boss. Like that's kind of a fun and entertaining boss. Like I think that the ball in Bion, clearly the best ball boss of the game, is really fun. Like we had a blast playing that in in the marathon here.
There's the pirate ship boss where
by the way, is the name of that boss.
The pirate ship boss where you're catapulting all the Bion balls into the ship. Like despite how ridiculous that scenario is, it's a pretty fun fight, I think.
It is, and I think like the giant beetle is really fun. The one that tracks you down. I think that like some of the enemies in the game too, I think are fun. Like the ice titans are nice and challenging. Some of the space pirates could get a little bit repetitive, but like I think the design of them looks good. The flying pirates I think look great. The brutes are cool.
The brutes look. I love like the little gorilla inspired moments.
Yeah,
like they're awesome.
I think I'm gonna give it a 3. I think I'm gonna give it a 3, more so for like the actual enemies in the game rather than maybe necessarily the like the bosses. Although I think Sirenon is a really fun fight. But yeah, I mean, like, are they blow away amazing? No, but I don't think they're like terrible either. And I'm trying to be a little bit charitable here. I mean, I think if we're talking like the story included with the final boss, which we have every right to, include that. But I'm gonna try not to, because I want to try and be a little bit charitable here, and I'll give it a 3. I think maybe that's again like a little bit generous, but what the heck?
If there's any game that deserves our generosity, I feel like it's this game.
Probably.
I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've given a single 4 yet, let alone a 5. I don't think. I think it's fair to say there are going to be 0 5s given today. But I'm curious.
We have 2 categories left, and I feel quite confident that there's going to be no 5s.
I'm curious to see. Well, if we only got 2 categories, I'm not even sure if we're going to see a 4 at this point. But I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible. You know what? To be honest. Well, actually, I'll save this for after, because, I don't want to spoil any of my scores, but there was one category where I was thinking, like, this is probably the highest ranking category that we can get to. And it's not expansions and power-ups, I would say, is what is coming up next. Although, again, I think that's fine. Like, each level has like at least a few hidden objectives for you to go and do, like hidden mods for you to find. I feel like, I mean, that's basically like the equivalent of the expansions here, is like finding that stuff that's out of the way that you need to go and collect. And I appreciate that Federation Force has that. It's the one aspect of the game that kind of makes it feel a little bit Metroid-y. And I mean, like, you know, it's not like finding optional power-ups is unique to Metroid by any means. But at least it kind of sort of bridges that gap a little bit. Because, I mean, without that, it doesn't feel very Metroid-y really at all. And there's some cool different ways that you can get mods. I mean, most of it usually involves us. You have to pick up the right load, like bring your ice, bring your fire, bring your thunder beam or whatever. But there's like some of them that are a little bit more tricky to do. I don't know. Now that being said, I don't know what my score is for it. I guess I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, your score, because I feel like I'm kind of on the fence between two scores again.
Again, I want to be generous, but like I gotta be real. This one, this is a 1, man. I gotta be real. This is a 1 because
Ouch.
I'll be honest. I cannot. There's not a single, I guess, mod puzzle, for lack of a better word, that I can even think of and remember. And I literally just saw this game in action, like not even 3 weeks ago, and. Yeah, like again, we were just talking about how, you know, the items, I think the actual items themselves, a few of them have some really interesting use cases, but like, I feel like, because I think it's fair to talk about the way you acquire them, because that's kind of the primary point of focus when we're talking about this and other definitive ranking episodes, you know, like, oh, this wicked spider ball puzzle. Yeah, who cares about the missile expansion? But that spider ball puzzle I had to do to get that missile expansion, rad as hell. Here it's like, you know, you're just kind of, you know, shooting a certain weapon at a gate, or, you know, finding a key in a crate and then taking that key, slowly taking this key back to the door that you have to unlock. And occasionally there'll be like, you know, a zip line that you can use to take and get a mod, or some kind of untraditional way by Federation Force means, but by and large that's really all you're doing, and there isn't just anything that stands out to me. And also, like we talked about earlier, when it comes to the mods, after you complete the level, that's it, they're gone, you're done. Have fun recollecting them over for 20 plus more levels. And so yeah,
to be fair, you do get to keep the mods that you collect, and you can use them, but they can break.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I want to be generous, but I have to follow my heart. My heart is telling me. I almost said fart there. My heart is telling me to give this a 1.
Amazing. Many Celine Dion parodies just came to mind. You know what? I was like, can I justify giving this a 3? I can't. I'm gonna give it a 2 because I appreciate. I guess that there is like, and maybe this is just like a low bar, but like I appreciate that they're there at all, because like most of the game is just like very straightforward. You're not wrong though. Like there's not very many that are just like, oh, that was fun. Like that was a fun little thing that I had to do in order to get that mod. You know what? The only other thing that maybe I'll try and justify my 2 with, and I don't know if this quite falls under expansions or not, but it's optional, so maybe it kind of does, is like each level kind of has a bonus objective that you can do in order to get like a higher score. And some of those are like kind of fun. Like the one level, like the mini golf level in Bion, one of the first levels that you do, the bonus objective is like destroy all the rocks in the level, which kind of sounds lame, but like it's kind of like oddly satisfying to like just shoot this big cannon at all these rocks. Some of them are like you got to defeat 10 hoppers or like 15 gamers. Some of them aren't very fun, and some of them it's just like you got to finish the level in under this amount of time. But some of them are okay. That's about as much as I can probably justify, though. You know, giving it And even then, I think it's a 2. I wish it could be higher, but there just aren't very many creative ways that really don't involve, like you said, just kind of like going out of your way to find this stuff and then very slowly making your way back to where you should be. So yeah, you're not wrong. It's low. It's a 2. Okay. And that leads us to music. And as always, I feel like I will acquiesce to you. What do you think about this this game, which has just a ginormous amount of music to be like, which is insane.
This game has a stupid amount of music. I think that's the best way to put it. Just an absolute stupid amount of music. This is another. I'm not even gonna bury the lead here. This is another 1. I'm sorry. It's not good. And for comparison, I gave Metroid Dread a 2 in the music category. So I'm ranking, and you know how much I despise the Dread soundtrack, but I am ranking this even below that. That is how uneventful and how missed the mark this music is. I will say there are a couple of gems in here that I have on the old driving playlist. I don't want to say like every single piece of music here is a stinker. Not true. There's I can probably count on my hand a good amount of songs out of the 200 plus, and I'm not exaggerating, songs that are on this 3DS cartridge. But yeah, we're talking 5 songs at most out of 200 plus songs that range from bad to forgettable. And yeah, it's just the game. You have some games like Metroid Prime that are both quality and quantity, and then you have games like this which you have a substantial quantity and no quality, and that's just kind of the worst. Yeah, that's just kind of the worst of it all.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's content versus, like it's content like made for consumption.
Quality versus quantity. Quantity versus quality. Excuse me. Exactly. Yeah. And I've also talked about. I think I feel like I just talked about this last episode, but I am not the biggest fan of when Metroid tries to do a traditional orchestral sounding soundtrack. That isn't my preferred way to do Metroid. I think Prime 3 is probably the best attempt at it. I think overall I really enjoy that soundtrack for the most part. That's exactly I remember now, because we were talking about that in the context of Olympus and Norian and how anyways, right. So but yeah, this game really does go all in on it, and I think for the most part it just doesn't work for me. It just kind of feels like a generic space opera score that's really trying to be, a Star Wars movie, but it's just not. It's it's we have Star Wars at home music. That's what it sounds like to me for the most part. And yeah, it just kind of misses the mark all around, again, with the exception of a few tracks. I feel like I know what I was going to say. Despite how much I don't like the soundtrack, the actual compositional team behind this I actually think is incredibly talented. Chad York, Darren Radke, and a third guy whose name I cannot remember at the moment. They're all incredibly talented. They did the Punch-Out soundtrack on the Wii, which is incredible. I love the Punch-Out soundtrack. They did the soundtracks for all the Mario Strikers games, which are all really awesome. Even Battle League, which I didn't really enjoy that game, phenomenal soundtrack. Absolutely love it. The Luigi's Mansion 2 and 3, they did the soundtracks for those games as well. Great soundtracks. Yeah, and so I have absolutely nothing against, this compositional team. Like, they do phenomenal work. But again, I feel like a lot of the things in this game, there was just, I think, a bad mission directive given throughout the whole pitch. And so I don't think it's an issue with, and I feel like that's a pretty good summary of this game, because Next Level, who, developed the game, an incredibly talented studio. So, a wonderful library of games. And I feel like, Federation Force in general is the exception, not the rule. And I don't think it's Next Level's fault by any means.
I agree. It's a 1 for music.
Yeah.
For that many tracks, it's staggering that like none of them stick out at all. And I don't know. Like I think that the main theme is like pretty decent. Like the down down.
Mm-hmm.
It maybe it's just because you hear that one the most, but like I can't even tell you like another single theme. Like it sounds like okay when you're listening to it, but you could definitely tell like there's when you're listening to a Metroid soundtrack, there's something about it, particularly like a Metroid Prime game that makes it sound like primey synthy style of music, and like that is where the music could have really maybe saved this game. I think you maybe could have got away with the chibi graphics if you had like a killer Metroid Prime style soundtrack, and unfortunately the soundtrack lets it down as much as the art style does. Maybe not as much, but pretty darn close. So yeah, I mean it's a 1, which is too bad because yeah, like all the other games that you mentioned, like I think that Next Level, and again just to generalize, like I think like. And I don't want to call Metroid Prime Federation Force a stinker, but like, just to keep with what the point I'm trying to make, like, this is really their only stinker that they've produced, right? Like, other than that, like, it's pretty solid titles, generally speaking. So, yeah, it's too bad that the music, you know, also is really weak, which is tough because like I feel like when I'm like kind of thinking of like an ideal Metroid game, and some of the weight that I put on some of these categories like is a little bit more higher than others. Like I want like a really good world and atmosphere. I need a really good soundtrack. I want exceptional gameplay, and the rest of it I want to be great as well. But like without those 3 things, I feel like it's tough. And when you have 2 of the 3 of them just immediately not working for you, it's tough. And gameplay was the one where I thought like if I was going to give a 4 to anything, it would have been gameplay. But even then, it's just like I think that's a bridge too far. Yeah, it's a 1 for the music, unfortunately, and that I think that's why I was trying to be charitable to some of those other categories, because I knew that I was going to end off with a 1. And I mean, like, I don't think that's a surprise. I don't think you'd hear many people vouching for the Federation Force soundtrack, but you know, even so, I kind of feel lousy because there clearly was a lot of work that went into, you know, making the soundtrack, and like there's just the plethora of tracks that there are, but they kind of blend together a little bit too much to be anything other than just like background noise, which is too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Actually, to do these composers justice, I'm going to bring up my music library right now. And I'm going to pull up Chad York, Darren Ratke, Mike Peacock. That's the 3rd individual. I wanted to make sure that we got all 3 of those individuals. Yeah, so that's Chad York, Darren Ratke, and Mike Peacock. That is the compositional trio that has done pretty much every single game developed by Next Level. And again, Federation Force, another Freudian slip
say
there.
Federation.
But yeah, Federation Force, I think when it comes to these individuals' talents is the exception, not the rule. And again, if you need proof, I mean, you know, YouTube's right there. Go check out some of their music, because it is wonderful stuff outside of this game.
Yeah. Okay, so I very quickly, there could be some inaccuracies here, so I apologize if there are, but I've added up our scores and I've divided them by 10, and we are coming away with a final average ranking. Andy Spiteri, 2.1 out of 5. Which, you know what? I feel like that's pretty darn good, considering. It maybe should be lower than that, if I'm being honest. Like that score out of 5 to me seems high for Metroid Prime Federation Force. Doom Eternal Crossing, 1.7. That's probably more realistic, if I'm being honest. And that's not to say, again, that we didn't have fun with this game or anything like that, but you know, it's certainly not going to be competing for the best Metroid game ever released. That's for sure.
I still want to stress, like, of all the events, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, I genuinely had the most fun watching you guys playing Federation Force out of every
it was a blast.
single event.
Yeah.
It was so much fun, and I can't state that enough, despite my 1.7 out of 5.
Well, and you know what? Like, that's kind of where, like, it's difficult to rank some of these multiplayer games, right? Because, like, you could have it's kind of like watching a bad movie. You could watch a movie, you're like, man, this is terrible. But if you watch it in the right circumstance with the right people, it's a great time, right? Like, I mean, the movie, that was a great time. Would I want to watch that by myself? No, I would not. But in the right context, in the right setting, it's a blast. And I kind of feel like that about Federation Force. I will play this game solo again sometime in the future. And
I mean, we have to do a guide on it eventually.
Eventually, the rent will be due eventually. So I mean, there's different ways that you could experience it. Some are better than others, and I think multiplayer, particularly among friends, was a great way to experience it. And it's too bad that, like, I mean, we had to do a lot of crazy things in order to do that. Like, a lot of practice and work went into even just making that possible to do in 2025. So
many hoops were jumped through.
Yes, I think that Gooey was pretty fed up with me telling him to work on his computer by the end of the marathon. But nevertheless, well, there it is, the definitive ranking for Metroid Prime Federation Force. I don't think anyone is probably surprised by these scores, and if they are, it's probably because they're higher than they might have been expecting. Let us know what your scores would be for each of the categories here. I'm really interested to hear what some of the feedback might be, and what other people's experiences are, solo, multiplayer, whatever. Let us know. August of 2026 is the 10-year anniversary. Maybe we'll be definitively ranking Blast Ball at that time. That would be something.
I'll say shout out to our Discord member, New Supreme Man. His favorite game is Metroid Prime Federation Force. It's the game that got him into the Metroid series, and I love it. I respect the hell out of that.
Yeah.
And you know what, New Supreme in particular, I want to hear from you, and I'm being genuine. I'm not being facetious when I say this. I want you to tell us what you love about this game, because I really do want to hear that perspective from someone who has more positive thoughts on this game.
My lasting thing here, just to get everybody hyped for August 2026, I think Federation Force is like significantly better than Blast Ball 2. It's like significantly, and if we were doing Blast Ball included in this, I don't know that we're above a 2, but that's for another day. You know what, and again, I think it's great if people love this game. I think that's awesome, and I earnestly mean that. So let us know, different strokes for different folks, right? And especially if this was your first game, and I believe that it was New Supreme Man's first Metroid game as well. So that again can certainly hold a special place in one's heart. Well, there we are. We are at the end. We have definitively ranked this Metroid Prime Federation Force game, and I think that we were fair. I think we were fair, but I think that we were also, just as well. We were accurate with some of our critiques. There it is. Let us know what you think. And that is going to do it for us, my friends. Friendly reminder, we're going to be streaming August 2nd, ZeldaCast Twitch. So come and hang out with us. We got a prediction episode for what we're gonna have before the week before that direct. So let us know what you think might be coming down the pipe there, and we'll try and read off some of those predictions on that show. Until then, everybody, we got to do a little bit of shilling here, then we'll be on our way. And of course, the first thing that we'll let you know, check out OmegaMetroid.com. Go there for all your Metroid needs, guides, maps, news, whatever. Go check it out. There's more there than you probably ever need if you're a Metroid fan. So go check that out. And of course, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Go like and rate, review, recommend. Like our videos over on YouTube. Subscribe over on YouTube. There's tons of great content over there, including the entirety of the 2025 Omega Metroid Marathon, which will be sorted into individual games here in just the next couple weeks. We've all taken a little bit of time just to recover from that, so give us a little bit of time and that'll be done. And of course, check us out over on Blue Sky, at Omega Metroid, at Doom Cross, at Spiteri316. We got a Patreon. You know, we got the Great Metroid. We are in the nitty-gritty, actually, of the Great Metroid area ranking here. There's not a lot of levels or areas left, so go check that out, patreon.com/SPNet. And that, my friends, is going to do it for us. So, until next week, everybody, take care.